Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and I'm continuing on the group of reels that Scott has sent in. This one is a Daiwa Regal X 2500C. It's a nice reel. I happen to like the Daiwa Regals. I fish with them frequently. Very, very smooth reel. I believe Scott picked this one up at a flea market in Southern California, although he does shop some other places as well. This one's made in Thailand by Daiwa. It's a nice reel. I believe the dating on the schematic that I have is June 2001. So that makes this reel, well, 20 years old plus, right? However, it's still in very nice condition, and it appears to be unused. We still have the plastic shrink wrap around the back of the spool, and if that's a survivor, wow, it's kind of interesting. Well, we're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts. As we do, I'm going to encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you like the art of reel repair, if you like to understand more about fishing reels and, well, fishing in general. We cover things other than the actual repair of reels. And if you subscribe, hit that notification button. It'll let you know when I post, where I post, and what I post. And that'll all be a good way for you to understand the scope of the channel and, well, whether you want to watch that particular episode or not. All right, well, we're going to take a look now at getting the rotor off, because I'm looking at the schematic, and the schematic is something I encourage everybody to do, particularly if you're not familiar with the reel. Go out on the internet, get that schematic of the reel. That schematic will give you a pictorial diagram of what the reel is made of component-wise, and if you get stuck, it gives you a path back to the part orientation and where the pieces are located and so on. And if you're just starting, well, it gives you a look into the reel and what to expect. Well, when I took the schematic, I noticed that on the side plate here, one of the screw holes is up under the rotor. That would be up here, and there's no way to get that screw without taking the rotor off first. That's why I've removed the spool and the drag adjuster knob, and now we'll take off the rotor by removing the click and the shim washer that are on the post. When I take my pieces and parts off, they go into a parts tray. This is the bottom of a fast food container. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can organize yourself in terms of keeping your parts available, but use the one that makes sense for you. The parts tray has worked out for me. All right, I just took a 12mm socket. This is a Mitchell tool. It fits over the top. And this rotor nut comes off in a counterclockwise manner, and that goes right into the parts tray as well. With that off, you should be able to remove the rotor by rocking it up gently. And when you do that, I like to service the rotor at the same time. Now, you do not need to remove the bail unless the bail is broken or giving you issues. Maybe you've dropped it in the water. Maybe there's sand in there, then go ahead and take it off. But as a general service, you do not need to do that. But I do oil the seams where the two bail wires meet. I also put a dab on that roller, and then I'll move it back and forth just to make sure that that oil works in. Well, again, this reel, by all indications, has never been used, and this, I guess, is a good illustration of what the reel looks like new. So I'm going to put the big pieces off to the side. They don't need to go into the parts tray. You're less likely to lose the big parts. You're more likely to lose the little ones. As a good practice for me, I tend to put them all in there. We're going to take the handle off next. The handle comes off by unscrewing the handle screw on the other side of the location for your handle. And then good practice is to put that handle screw right back into the handle. That way it doesn't become separated. Well, there's that screw I was talking about, excuse me, that was hiding under the rotor. If you simply remove the bump guard and the case screws, you would not be able to get this piece off. So that's why we had to do it that way. All right, underneath we'll take the bump guard off next. There's one screw holding that on. And there's about 3 or 4 screws here, so you want to kind of segregate these so that you know which screws go where. So there's two that are holding that bump guard on. I like that. Sometimes you're going to find a bump guard that only has a tab hiding up under this side of it. And if you break that tab, well, you're out of luck. In this case, they've used two screws. The way I'm going to keep those separate is I'm going to put that in one section of that parts tray. I'm going to put those two screws right in there with that so that it keeps it apart. And what I'll do with the side plate screws now is I'll put them in that other side of that parts tray there so that they are separated. Next up, we can remove the side plate screws that are holding the case on. Now these appear to have different sides and faces and the like, so this is a good place to tell you to take pictures. These two seem to be the same. This one's long that goes up top, and this one's got a wider head below. So take that picture. I don't know why they've used as many different screws as they have, but they did. And just be aware of how those screws are and where the location is. All right, there's two more to go here. If you have any questions on fishing reels, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, maybe there's an issue you're having with a reel and you're not even started on it yet, you're just kind of trying to figure out why it's behaving the way it is, leave that in the comments section. It doesn't have to be about this reel, it can be about any reel. And if you do that comment section, I do try to respond to them. Usually takes me, well, anywhere from about 8 to 24 hours to respond. But I do try to answer those, and I'll try and get you back on track if that's the case. Well, I noticed that the three screws, the one up top and these two, are all the same. It's this one down here that's different. So you make a note of that. I keep them separate in the parts tray, and we should be able to remove the side plate now. All right, well, there we go. We have a bushing on this side. This is a good opportunity to tell you. Folks like the hot rod reels. This bushing should be able to be replaced by a bearing if that's something you wanted to do. This is a plastic bushing. Plastic bushings are fine. This is a 2500 size reel, so it's not going to take the same kind of torque and stress that a larger saltwater reel would take, is particularly against fighting fish. But if you wanted to put a bearing in there, you measure the bearing three ways. You measure the inside diameter, that's here, the outside diameter, point to point, and the height of that bushing, and then you should be able to find a bearing to replace that. You won't find a bearing to replace it simply by going on and looking for the bearing through a parts manufacturer because, well, that bearing didn't exist, right? At least in a schematic. All right. Sometimes you can get the main gear out. This time you can't. There's a Phillips head screw that's holding the axle shaft in on the crosswind block. So that comes out next. When you do reel service, what you want to do is you want to clean the reel. That is, remove the old greases and the like. You want to inspect the parts to make sure that they're all uniform and that there's no cracks or chips or anything like that going on. And you want to re-oil and re-lube once all of those inspections have been made and the re-lubing has occurred. We're trying to take this crosswind block off now. I'm using needle nose pliers for that, and we'll clean that up in just a moment. When you clean it up, I use the least abrasive methods first. So I'm just going to use a cotton swab here to get rid of the old grease. And I guess this is what happens to 20-year-old grease. It just kind of coagulates. If you want to loosen it up a little bit more, take a spray of a penetrating oil. That's a good product to dissolve the greases. And if you do that, you'll have a nice clean body. Now this one's clean to begin with. All right, we're just going to put these three right here because we're going to get back to those quickly. I could put those in the parts tray. Why don't we do that just because it's good practice. Put those into my parts tray. So if you take pictures along the way, that helps you, like that schematic helps you, only it kind of takes it in the same sequence in an organization way that you know how to do it. So for example, I'm going to remove the pinion gear now. That has an anti-reverse mechanism underneath. But notice we have an anti-reverse override right here. And there's a spring here that, well, for whatever reason, if that spring happened to shoot, well, you probably would have a hard time just trying to logic out how that goes. So this is a good place to take a picture so that you know where that is and how to remount that, just in case accidents happen. And accidents happen all the time. Time to time we get those oops moments on my videos, and sometimes I have to go back and look at those pictures. Now my pictures are videos, you don't need to take videos, but use your cell phone camera at critical places. That'll kind of tell you where it is. Alright, so the first thing, 2 screws. Put those into the parts tray. Now notice your collar. Your collar's got the 2 screws came out, and there's 2 studs, one on each side of the hold down, so that can come out next. And actually that whole assembly is going to come out next. When I pulled that assembly out, one of the things I noticed was that this anti-reverse clutch has a little tag coming off of it. That's the override. And that clutch is going to run on this stud right here. So pay attention to that when it's time to put it back together again. I take the top section and that off. And we just want to make sure that the pinion gear and the like is cleaned up. So again, this hasn't been used, so the only thing that might be in there is a little bit of old grease. I'll wipe that down with a paper towel. Just running my fingernail through the channels to get that cleaned. If you found that there was anything in there that was kind of stuck, you can use a pick to just kind of drive it through. Just like that. I did notice that there's a very little metal washer on the bottom here. Pay attention to that when you do that. Okay, we have ball bearings in this one. I'm going to oil those bearings. I'm going to use a fishing wheel oil. In this case, I'm using Lucas's oil. And many times folks have heard me say, don't care what the oil is, but I do care that it is a fishing wheel oil. The open bearing side goes down. We have that collar. Then I'm going to wipe that collar off. You don't want grease on that collar because that's going to serve as your clutch point for the anti-reverse. You don't oil an anti-reverse. This is the anti-reverse clutch. All you do is make sure that it is clean and free of debris. Okay. Once you have that arm connected over that stud, it's time to put the rest of it on. There's a small washer that goes over the pinion shaft at this point. Then we have this tie down. This tie down actually goes where the screws are going to go. Just like that. Then we have the bearing goes next. Make sure you oil that bearing. And then we have the collar going on. Now look for the studs for the collar. They got to sit on that to hold this down. And then we can grab our 2 screws and we can tighten that assembly down. So I like these Regal reels. I actually fished one that was made in the early 1990s. The name has stayed, the designs have changed. And this one is a nice, very dependable reel that I've had hours and hours of use from. Alright, again, this is just old grease in here now because the reel hasn't been used. So we're just going to get the old grease out. Now if you're doing your reel and it's got the greases in that, make sure you check the teeth on the gears. Both sides. This is going to drive the crosswind. This is going to drive the pinion gear. And then you can put new greases on there. As I mentioned before, a lot of just servicing a reel is making sure it's clean, doing the inspection, and then resetting. Alright, I've greased up that, but I want to put that crosswind block in before I put the main gear in. So we're just going to get a little bit on all surfaces of the crosswind block. So it's the teeth, it's the back, which is going to ride against the plate, and it's the front where that, well, I say crosswind block, this is crosswind gear. This is the crosswind block, that goes next. But all of these pieces get the grease on all sides because they contact each other, and in order to run smooth, well, the grease is going to be there to facilitate that. All right, that's how you put the gear and the block in. Now we'll take the main gear, and you needed to do that first because you can't put the main gear in and then try and put the crosswind gear in. You can't mesh it that way. All right, a little bit of grease onto the base of the pinion gear. We cleaned that out earlier. Now we can insert the main gear and make sure it meshes with that crosswind gear below. Next up then is the axle shaft. Wipe the axle shaft down, make sure it's clean. Very light coat of grease on the axle shaft. You put any more than that on and it's only going to rub off when you insert it through that pinion gear there. There's a flat side to that axle shaft. You can see the screw hole. That flat side faces out so that you can merge it into the crosswind block. And if this is off camera, I will apologize, but it comes down and it seats itself so that you can get the hole aligned. Once that screw's aligned, go get the screw. And simply retighten it using your Phillips head screwdriver. I say simply, I mean little pieces. Well, it's not that simple all the time, but patience will pay off. And remember, you had to put that axle shaft and all of this in, and now you're going to have to close it up before you can put the rotor on. A lot of the reels that are made do not require that step. Some of them have the cases you can remove without removing the rotor. This is not one of those. All right, a little bit of grease onto the shaft. The bushing is in place on that side plate. Just press it down firm. Now make sure you have a nice tight seal on all sides. And go get the 3 screws that don't matter where they go. Put those in. And tighten those up. So this, as I mentioned, is a very dependable reel. It's lightweight. It's a nice freshwater reel. You can use it inshore, ocean, or deep bay. But it's not going to fight the biggest fish. But 2500 is kind of a compromised mid. It's the beginning of a mid-sized reel. The 500s and the 1000s and the 2000s are pure freshwater. Then you go to the 3000, 4000, 5000, which are the intermediate sizes. And this is kind of right between the two, right? It's between the light, ultralight sizes and the intermediate sizes. So a little bit more versatile. Folks ask me if they can only buy one reel for spinning, and they're going to be fishing in kind of a mixture of salt and deep lakes and the things, what's the right size? And the general answer is it's a 5000, 4 or 5000, because it's more versatile. All right, we've got all of that in. You can spin this now. Just make sure it's spinning properly, which it is. We're going to go ahead and put the bump guard on. I think that's independent of the rotor. You can do that. Some of these doesn't matter which way you put them back on, and that's the case here. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that the pieces are aligned. And that they fit snugly. There we go. Got them. I'm going to go into my parts tray and get the 2 screws that belong there. And we'll go ahead and put those in. One more. Those 2 screws are the same, so it doesn't matter which goes high and which goes low. So Scott got these at a flea market. I believe. And flea markets are good sources for used fishing equipment. Yeah, there you go, that one. That one sits better. All right, so that's the bottom end of the reel. Let's come up top then. The rotor goes on next. The rotor nut goes on. Remember, this is the 12mm nut. You can use a flat wrench because there's no lip on this rotor. And if you like, it's a 12mm nut. So if you wanted to just grab your open-end wrench or your box wrench instead of the tool that I used before, go ahead and do that. Once it's there, give it a spin. It's still spinning beautifully. We have the click ratchet and the spool shim washer. There you go next. We have the handle. Now this was set up on the left side. I think Scott's a right-hander. I think he just got this from the market set up lefty. I'm going to set it up righty. It's interchangeable. And if you want to change it over, well, go right ahead. I got a question on the Roddy video I just did. Can I get a left-handed version of this reel? Well, back in the day, the early reels were either left or righty because they had a firm mounted case. And now, of course, almost all of these are switchable. So that eliminated that issue. All right, we're going to look at the drag washers in here. My guess is it's one of two things. It's either going to be a felt washer or a Teflon washer, but we're going to find out. These are held in place by a little clip. You need to remove that clip in order to remove the washers. I just use a pick. This rides in a groove in the assembly. And let's see what we have in here. Okay, well, we get some kind of a fabric washer there. Fabric washers, as well as felt washers, they get some lubrication because you got to keep those fresh. So I'm going to just put a little bit of grease on that. I'm using a drag grease, but you don't have to use a drag grease. Clean out the channel, make sure that there's no debris in here. Again, I'm going on the assumption this reel is unused, so that makes things a little bit easier. And we're just going to do the same to all three of these washers. There's two round washers with a slot in them. Those are called keyed washers. They go top and bottom. So that's the bottom one. I'm going to grease again the second washer. That's one of the reasons I wear the glove here. It enables me to use that as a tool without getting the grease all over me. The middle washer is called an eared washer. It has 2 points on it to fit in a sleeve, and it has a circle in the center that does not grab the axle shaft. And then we have one more of these. It goes up top, and then the final key washer. And then you look for the groove to remount that clip. Anchor one side in the slot, and just kind of work it around. Again, if it's off camera, I'm going to apologize for that. These are kind of hard to do because, well, my hands are big and all that other stuff. But eventually you'll work it in just like that. So that's all set up now. You can see how it's sitting in the groove. And grease off to the side for a moment. Put the spool back on. Give it that final test. Put the adjuster knob on. Tighten it up. Make sure it holds, and once it holds, back it off. You don't want to press the grease out of those drag washers. You should back it off after every use. All right, here we go. As I mentioned before, it's a beautiful reel. It was new, had some old grease in it, and doesn't hurt to take it apart, clean it up to make sure that it's ready to go fishing. Scott, you got a nice reel there, and really appreciate you sending it in. To everybody, thanks if you're a first responder or essential personnel for all you've done during the pandemic. And to all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I hope you've enjoyed that Daiwa 2500C Regal X, and I hope he gets a chance to go fishing. Have a great day.